I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of Washington, D.C.'s cherry blossoms. Hello, my name is Rob. I'm a tour guide and the founder of Trip Hacks DC Tours. On this channel, you'll find my best tips, tricks, and hacks for exploring Washington, D.C. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification icon so that you don't miss anything in the future. And when you're done watching Trip Hacks DC videos, head on over to triphacksdc.com for even more. 2020 is an unprecedented time here in Washington, D.C. The city is basically shut down right now, and the National Cherry Blossom Festival is completely canceled. It's very important that during this difficult time, we practice social distancing and staying safe, which means not getting onto the metro, going down to the Tidal Basin, and crowding around the cherry trees. And I've got to be honest, this whole thing makes me really sad. But because I can't run any real tours this year, I wanted to make sure that you get a completely free virtual tour of the cherry blossoms. Because today, as I premiere this video, the blossoms are in peak bloom. So to produce this virtual tour from inside my office, I collaborated with my friend Nicole, a very talented photographer who has generously donated some of her best cherry blossom photos from years past. So welcome to the video, Nicole.
Hi, my name is Nicole Glass. I'm a photographer here in the Washington, D.C. area. I've been living here for about 12 years now. Always love going to see the cherry blossoms, and I'm excited to be here with Rob for this virtual tour.
Make sure to check out the video description afterwards so that you can follow Nicole on YouTube, Instagram, and all of the social medias. And before we start, I just want to say that while these photos are a great way to experience the cherry blossoms in 2020, they just do not do justice to how amazing they truly are in person.
That's right, photos of the cherry blossoms are beautiful, but nothing beats seeing them in person. It truly is a magical experience to walk under this sea of pink flowers, and I hope that it's an experience that you will all get to have one day.
So hopefully, in 2021 and beyond, you will get a chance to come and see them for real. With all of that said, let's go ahead and start our tour. The story of the Cherry Blossom Festival goes way back in our country's history to the decades following our Civil War. Now, the main character in this story is a woman named Eliza Skidmore. She attended Oberlin College and then became a writer. Now, this was a big deal because remember, this was a time in history when not many women went to college and not many got jobs like this. She was also very lucky because her brother George was an American diplomat and he got to travel around the world, including to places like Japan. And on many of the trips, Eliza got to tag along. In 1885, she moved to Washington, D.C., and right away started telling everyone about these amazing cherry trees that she'd found in Japan, and how great it would be to have them in our capital. But there was a problem.
What was the problem?
Well, Nicole, the problem is no one would listen to her. Even though she was a very accomplished woman, she just did not have that political sway that was necessary to convince people that this was a worthwhile idea. That was until 1909, when she did find another woman who did have that political influence.
Who was that?
First Lady Helen Taft, the wife of President William Howard Taft. Once the First Lady was on board, the plans came together very quickly. The city of Tokyo actually donated 2,000 trees. They put them on a boat and sent them halfway around the world. Problem was, by the time they got here, they were diseased, and the agriculture department said that they needed to be destroyed. So President Taft ordered all the trees to be burned.
That's awful. So what happened after that?
Well, the Americans felt really bad about destroying all of those beautiful cherry trees. So the Secretary of State actually wrote to the Japanese ambassador apologizing for what happened. The ambassador responded by negotiating another donation of trees, this time 3,000, and again coming from Tokyo.
Wow, so did those survive?
They sure did. They arrived in 1912. First Lady Taft and the wife of the Japanese ambassador actually met up and planted the first 2 cherry trees near the Tidal Basin. And many people mark that exact moment as the very first National Cherry Blossom Festival.
Wow, that's really cool. Are those trees still there?
Yes, believe it or not, they're still there. They're located near the Japanese Lantern, one of the stops that we're gonna make on our tour. They're even marked by a small plaque so that you can find them.
That's really cool. I'll keep an eye out for them next time.
Okay, so now that we know the story, let's head over to the Washington Monument, where we can continue on our tour. It's probably safe to say that the Washington Monument doesn't need much introduction. It opened in 1884, which makes it the oldest monument in the city. It's also the tallest building in the city, by far. And no, there is no law that says a building in Washington, D.C. cannot be taller than the Washington Monument. If you've ever heard that one before, then make sure to go back and watch my Washington, D.C. Myths video, where I bust it. In a typical year, the Washington Monument is where they host the National Cherry Blossom Kite Festival, one of my personal favorite events. But I brought you to the Washington Monument because there are a few patches of really great cherry trees here.
And they are some of the earliest blooming trees on the National Mall. So even if you come before peak bloom, you can usually get some great pictures and views here.
That's true. It's because there are actually about a dozen varieties of cherry trees in Washington, D.C. Some are earlier bloomers, and some are later bloomers. I've actually seen some of the cherry trees near the Washington Monument in bloom as early as the beginning of March.
Wow, that's early.
Yeah, it is. But let's go ahead and cross Independence Avenue so I can take you over to show you the Japanese lantern. This is personally one of my favorite hidden gems because it's literally one of the oldest things in the entire city. The Japanese lantern is 369 years old, which obviously means it was not part of the original city, since Washington, D.C. is only 219 years old.
So where did it come from?
It's actually part of a pair. Its partner is still located in Tokyo, which is where it came from. In a typical year, lighting this lantern is part of the official opening ceremony of the National Cherry Blossom Festival. So even though I don't come over here too often otherwise, this is a really cool spot to be when the trees are in bloom. Now a few steps away is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, a spot where I do spend a lot of time. This is one of the newest major memorials on the National Mall, and it's the only one that's dedicated to a person who was not a former president.
It is definitely one of my favorite monuments to take photos of, especially during cherry blossom season.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite places for a lot of reasons. Martin Luther King gets quite an amazing view. His statue is looking out over the Tidal Basin to the cherry trees on the other side. There are a lot of cherry trees planted inside the memorial as well, and they are there because they typically bloom around the anniversary of Martin Luther King's death. So there's really a lot of symbolism packed into the memorial design.
That's a really cool design element.
I agree. And before you leave the memorial, make sure you read some of the quotes that are carved into the granite wall on both sides of his statue. These are some of his absolute best quotes and really give you a sense of the things that he believed in. Once you're finished reading, before long, you're already at the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial. This is one of my personal favorites because it's a huge memorial and there is so much history packed into this one. And during peak bloom, it's one of the most beautiful spots as well.
I don't think as many people visit this one as some of the other ones.
That's true, because it's a little bit out of the way, so you probably won't see it unless you're on a tour or you specifically make your way over here. FDR is the only president who served more than 2 terms. He was actually elected 4 times, but he passed away in office after serving for 12 years. And his memorial is loosely split into 4 areas, one for each of those terms. Make sure to stop and see the scenes of America during the Great Depression and really appreciate the pain that our country felt during those years. And say hello to Fala, FDR's Scottish Terrier and the only dog to be memorialized on the National Mall in this way. And if you're into hidden gems, as you're on your way out, make sure to stop and look for the Japanese pagoda.
I have seen this before. Why is it there?
That's actually a really good question. Not a lot is actually known about this pagoda, other than that it was a gift from the mayor of Yokohama to the city of Washington, D.C. But it is very fitting for it to be located right here next to all these amazing cherry trees. I'm gonna go ahead and grab some iced coffee. But as we're doing that, let's go ahead and appreciate all of the amazing cherry trees located right on the Tidal Basin.
This is a great spot for a picnic on a nice day.
Yes, I love an iced coffee at a picnic here. If you do go for a picnic, I like to get there early because this spot can get pretty crowded.
Early morning is one of the best times to get photos of the blossoms. Nothing beats sunrise.
Well, Nicole, we've almost made it to our final stop on the tour, the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. This one actually has a really interesting story when it comes to the cherry blossoms. Franklin Roosevelt, you know, the guy whose memorial we just left, was actually a huge fan of Thomas Jefferson. He pushed really hard for the creation of a Jefferson Memorial, and he specifically wanted it to be located on this spot. That's because this is one of the few spots in Washington, D.C. with a nice, clear view from the White House. Problem was, they had created a small forest of cherry trees on this spot when they planted them near the Tidal Basin. Now, legend has it that a group of local women were so concerned about what might happen to these trees that they actually came down to this spot and chained themselves to their favorite cherry trees.
They were literal tree huggers.
I know, right? Now, this next part of the story may or may not be true, but as it goes, the construction workers, after getting really frustrated, started to offer the ladies tea, until they eventually all had to go use the restroom and they left. The Memorial Temple was completed in 1943, but the giant statue of Thomas Jefferson inside was not added until 1947, which, if you know about World War II history, you can probably guess the reason.
Yeah, I think I can.
Speaking of World War II, as you might imagine, there was some controversy about having all of these Japanese cherry trees right in the middle of the Capitol during World War II. After Pearl Harbor, there was some vandalism, and a few people even called for all of the cherry trees to be destroyed. And just like this year, there were several years in the 1940s when we did not have a national cherry blossom festival. So really, it is quite fortunate that things did not go differently during those years. And with that, we conclude our virtual cherry blossom tour. Nicole, I want to thank you for joining me on the tour and providing all of the photos to help illustrate how awesome the cherry blossoms are.
Sure thing. I'm really happy to have been able to collaborate with you with this virtual tour. As I said before, photos and videos are awesome, but nothing beats coming and seeing the cherry blossoms yourself. So I hope everyone watching this gets the chance to do that someday.
Now, if people want to follow you, what are the best places for them to do that?
Well, I actually have a photography-related YouTube channel where people can find me. All they have to do is type in my name, Nicole Glass. Or if people want to see more photos from the Washington, D.C. area, I do post a lot of those over on my Instagram at Nicole S. Glass.
And I'll say, if you made it this far, then you might be interested in a real-life Trip Hacks DC tour. We really only scratched the surface of the things that you can see and do on the National Mall. So head on over to triphacksdc.com to see all of the tours that you might be able to try on a future trip. Thanks for joining.